There are so many ways of playing the 12-bar blues form, but maybe too often we revert to the old standby. Now don't get me wrong, I love that riff. It is the basis for so many great blues songs and classic rock songs and country songs. But there are other ways of playing the 12-bar blues. And the chords we're going to do in this video are going to take your blues rhythm playing to the next level. So let's look at this first chord shape. This chord shape is actually a little tricky if you're new to it. It sounds like this. It sounds amazing. It is so rich and interesting. It's called A9. The trick of it is that you've got to get used to starting with your second finger on the root there, A, on the bottom string. Usually when we're playing chords, we think of bar chords, and usually our first finger wants to jump out first to grab things. But this is just a case where you've got to get used to getting that second finger there. There's no bar in the chord at all, right? And you'll notice that we actually end up skipping the A string, but the A string just gets blocked, kind of without really trying. It just gets blocked by this finger here. So you just get a clicking sound when you strum through it. Now this chord is a movable chord, like a lot of chords on guitar, which makes it so easy to change to a different chord, like the 4 chord or the 5 chord in a blues context. All we have to do is we think about where the root is. In this case, the root is on the low E string, so that of course is an A because 5th fret of E is an A. If we want to go up to the 4 chord, we just move it up to the root being the 10th fret and back to A. So we could, even just with this one shape, play a really interesting 12-bar blues. Let's back to D there. Back to A. Maybe a little pentatonic. Up to E. Down to D, we can go chromatically. Sweet. Back to A. There we go. They're kind of jazzy sounding, right? They are basically dominant chords. It's not that different than playing an A7. But it is useful to know that this is a 9 chord and that it's based on a dominant chord form, meaning that any time you have an A7, you can make it A9. That is important to remember because we want to know when we're playing any song, especially a blues situation, when can we use these chords? We don't want to use them at the wrong moment, right? But anytime A7, just change it to A9. And it sounds a little more jazzy, a little more interesting. You can go back and forth. A7. That's good, because if you got 4 bars of A in the 12-bar form, that's a long time to play, right? Go up to D. That's a D9, but I could go D7. Yeah. A9. A7. 5 chord in the key of A is E, right? So I'm up here. My root on the 12th fret is E, of course. I'm just doing the 9 shape there. Chromatically down to the 4 chord. Love it. Maybe a turnaround. So even though that chord is movable, we don't always want to have to travel so far to get to the next chord of the song. So we want to be able to find our 4 chord and our 5 chord quickly. And we have a little system here that I teach all of my students how to find a 4 chord. And that is basically if this note is your 1 chord or the root of your 1 chord, then the root of your 4 chord is always up a string. Easy. You could calculate the letters if you like. A, B, C, D, it's a D chord. But it's faster in some cases to just know that it's up a string. I call that the 1-4-5 landmark because we know that if the 1 chord is here, we know the 4 chord is always here, and we know the 5 chord is always here. Makes it easy. So now we want a chord form that's going to work from that D root there, right? And because we're moving up a string, the chord shape for a 9 chord is going to change as well. And it looks like that. We're still using the second finger to start the chord. The second finger is on the root there. So now, once your fingers are able to make this switch quickly, you have a very tight little space that you can go from 1 chord to 4 chord using A9 to D9. That's the A9 and the D9. Now that is really magic because what happens between A9 and D9 is they both have this E note on top. So when you hear one to the other, you hear the change in harmony from 1 chord to 4 chord, but you hear some consistency because you hear that they share one of the same notes, and that's E. So A9 and D9. So let's do a little 12 bar using these shapes. Quick change to D, back to A9, and D9, back to A, now we know from the 1-4-5 landmark that the 5 chord is always 2 frets up from the 4 chord. So if my 4 chord was here, my 5 chord is there. That's E9. Now we've got all 3 chords that we need, and whenever we're on the 5 chord, we can always do that little chromatic move down. So let's play a 12 bar blues using just 9 chords in this tight little space. We've got A9, so now we have a very different sound and feel to this 12 bar form. It's got a little bit of a jazzy feel to it. It's very similar to T-Bone Walker's Stormy Monday, although that song is not actually a 12 bar. I did a video about that. You can check that out in the channel. And you'll notice in that T-Bone Walker style, what he does a lot with these 9 chords is he slides into them or just moves into them chromatically from 1 fret below. That's pretty cool. It's very bluesy, it's very jazzy. We can do it with any of them. That was the D9, the A9, the D9, and back to the A9. He even goes above the chord. Woo, that's a lot of tension. I mean, what chord is that? That's like an A sharp 9. How does an A sharp 9 belong in this key? And it doesn't belong at all. Neither does the A flat 9. Neither of them belong, but that intense tension is resolved slightly after. So we don't mind. We kind of like it. We can feel this rise and fall back into the 1 chord or the 4 chord. Works on all of them. In fact, here's a really great move going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord using these 9 chords is we have A9 like this. And instead of going directly to the D9, go above D9 and then hit it. That is a nice transition, right? So now we have 2 ways of transitioning from A9 to D9. Going straight there, remember, is also awesome because we get to keep this E note on top. Right? Those are both cool. Or we can do the T-Bone Walker kind of thing. And let's go and reverse that going back to the A chord. So we'll go below. So we have something like. Let's play with the D chord. Back to A. From above, why not? E. You could walk to E there. Back to D. And you notice that chromatic move from E to D is kind of the same thing that T-Bone Walker is doing on any moment, but we're just doing it in the standard spot here. Right? Because we're above D and then we hit D. And you can use that E9 for your last chord at the end of the turnaround. Could be E7, but it can be E9. You can use them. Mix and match as much as you like. So let's just pause and briefly explain what does it mean by a 9 chord. And it's really pretty simple. It's whenever you have a number on a chord, it just means that you're adding a note to the chord, and the number represents a note in relation to the root, right? So, for example, if you have an A7 chord, that's adding a 7 to an A chord. So an A chord is root 3rd 5th, an A7 is root 3rd 5th plus 7. Now it's a specific 7, it's a minor 7, but let's just leave that off for a second. It's this chord, right? You know that chord. So a 9 is just adding a 9 from the root A, and we would count A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's 9 up. And you would say, well, wait a second, why'd you pass through A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B? Because that is 9 from A, so it's basically up an octave plus 1. And that's the 9 in that chord. And this is the 9 in that chord. But if all that sounds kind of like gobbledygook to you, don't worry about it. Just get good at the chords for now, right? Sometimes with the music theory, it's like you just have to hear it often and repeated many times, and eventually it sinks in when all the other information starts to connect. So I had mentioned that other video on T-Bone Walker, and if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link to it here. It's called The Greatest Blues Chord Progression Ever, and it probably is. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Please like and subscribe and share this video. Tell your guitar friends about us. We're going to see you here every Saturday.